I transmigrated into a grim dark world as an invincible god, but instead of conquering kingdoms, I let the world's most terrifying villainess lock me in her dungeon. Why? Because she's my favorite character, and honestly, she looks absolutely stunning when she's threatening to break my legs. The wind howling through the jagged peaks of the Black Void Mountains was cold enough to freeze blood. But inside the obsidian stronghold of the demon sect, the atmosphere was downright suffocating. Yan Zhuiying, the supreme tyrant of the dark cultivation realms, glided down the corridors of her fortress. Her dark silk robes trailed behind her like a shroud of shadows, and her eyes, cold and sharp as chipped ice, scanned the darkness. For the past 3 days, she had felt a presence. Someone was tracking her. Not a clumsy assassin from the orthodox sects, nor a greedy elder plotting a coup. This stalker was different. They moved through her lethal array traps with an eerie, impossible precision, slipping past her elite shadow guards as if they were nothing but air. Zhuiying stopped. Her hand drifted to the hilt of the abyssal solitaire blade at her waist. She closed her eyes, spreading her spiritual sense across the corridor. There, behind the grand pillar near the entrance of her forbidden archive, with a burst of dark energy, she moved. In less than a heartbeat, she closed the distance. The abyssal solitaire blade cleared its scabbard with a sharp, lethal hiss, its blade wreathed in terrifying black flames that hungered for life force. She slammed the cold steel flat against the pillar, trapping the intruder by the throat, her dark aura flaring to its absolute maximum to crush his spirit. "Who sent you?" she demanded, her voice a low, melodic purr that usually made grown men weep and beg for mercy. "Speak, or I will shred your soul into 1,000. She stopped. The man pinned against the stone wasn't trembling. He wasn't pale. In fact, his eyes were wide, sparkling, and fixed entirely on her face. He looked like a starving man who had just been handed a masterpiece. His name was Lu Chun, and he was having the absolute best day of his life. "Oh my God!" Lu Chun gasped, his voice entirely too loud for someone with a demonic blade pressing into his windpipe. The legends did not do this justice. The symmetry, the sheer, unadulterated presence. Look at the gradient on the black flames. Is that pure yin energy manifestation? It's breathtaking. Zhuiying's brow furrowed. The killing intent radiating from her faltered for a fraction of a second out of sheer confusion. "What nonsense are you?" "And the abyssal soul-eater blade," Lu Chun continued, practically vibrating with excitement, entirely ignoring her question. He leaned his neck closer to the sharp edge just to get a better look at the hilt. The ancient crossguard etching is flawless. The way the dark energy perfectly complements the silver filigree. Peak weapon design, 10/10, masterpiece. Could you hold it at just a slightly higher 45-degree angle? The lighting from the spiritual lamps in this corridor is immaculate. It really defines your cheekbones. "Silence," Zhuiying hissed, her dark aura flaring aggressively to mask her sudden, profound bewilderment. "You have crossed into the inner sanctum of the demon sect. You have tracked my movements for days. You know my secret route to the archive. Who is your informant? Which of the Grand Orthodox Masters gave you the map to my arrays?" Lu Chun blinked, a look of profound, affectionate pity crossing his face. "Informant, Master Chun, please. That fraud doesn't even know his own sect's history. I don't need a map. I know you come here every Tuesday at midnight to check the seal on the ancient demonic core because you're secretly worried it'll breach and wipe out the mortal villagers at the base of the mountain, even though you pretend you don't care about them." Zhuiying's blood ran cold. The blade in her hand trembled. No one knew that. Not her right-hand general, not her closest disciples. She had kept that secret locked in the deepest recesses of her mind. "You," her voice dropped to a dangerous, lethal whisper, "you know too much. You are a threat to everything I have built. I also know you prefer your tea with dry osmanthus instead of honey. That your favorite combat stance has a minor blind spot on the upper left flank because of an old injury you got when you were 16. And that you look absolutely peerlessly iconic when you're angry," Lu Chun said, beaming at her with an unshakable, unapologetic sincerity. Zhuiying stared at him, her mind frantically trying to process the situation. He was talking too loudly, his voice echoing off the obsidian walls, completely destroying the grim, terrifying atmosphere of her stronghold. He wasn't a spy using psychological warfare, he was completely, hopelessly unhinged. "Guards!" she commanded, snapping her fingers. A dozen elite shadow assassins materialized from the darkness, swords drawn, kneeling before her. "Drag him to the abyssal dungeon," Zhu Ying ordered, sheathing her blade with a sharp click. "Chain him with the unbreakable cold iron cuffs. Suppress his spiritual meridian. I will interrogate him myself when he learns the meaning of fear." "Yes, sect master," the guard shouted, grabbing his arms. "Wait, wait," Lu Chun called out as he was dragged away, still looking back at her over his shoulder with stars in his eyes. "Can I get a cell with a view of the training grounds? Your morning sword forms are legendary. And don't forget to eat dinner, Zhu Ying. You skip meals when you're stressed." "Take him away," she yelled, her face flushing with a bizarre mix of rage and an emotion she couldn't quite identify. An hour later, Lu Chun was locked in the deepest, darkest cell of the abyssal dungeon. The walls were solid obsidian, damp and freezing, designed to break the resolve of the strongest cultivators in the world. Heavy, ancient cold iron chains bound his wrists, glowing with runes meant to suppress even a god's spiritual energy. The guard slammed the heavy iron door shut, leaving him in total darkness. The moment the footsteps faded, Lu Chun sighed. "Man, the atmosphere in here is great, but the dust is a nightmare." With a casual, effortless flick of his wrists, the unbreakable cold iron cuffs shattered into a dozen pieces, the ancient suppression runes dissolving into harmless sparks. He didn't even use a shred of visible spiritual energy. His power level was so vastly superior to the laws of this world that the chains were essentially made of wet paper to him. He stood up, stretched his arms, and looked around the filthy cell. "Well," Lu Chun muttered, grabbing a discarded rusty iron bar from the corner of the cell and using his bare hands to casually shape it into a perfectly functional broom. "If my empress is going to come down here to interrogate me, I can't have her stepping in dirt. Time to clean up." By the time Zhu Ying returned to the dungeon a few hours later, prepared to unleash her most ruthless interrogation techniques, she froze at the threshold of the cell. The floor was swept immaculate, the cobwebs were gone, the prisoner was sitting cross-legged on the stone bench. Having used a fraction of his god-tier energy to subtly warm the freezing room, so it felt like a cozy spring afternoon. Lu Chun looked up, spotted her standing there with her daggers drawn, and smiled brightly. "Zhu Ying, you're back! Come in, take a seat. I cleared off the best spot for you." Zhu Ying gripped her daggers tighter, her mind completely fracturing. The cuffs are broken, the suppression array is shattered. And he's mopping? For the first time in her life, the supreme tyrant of the Dark Realms felt a sudden, distinct wave of sheer, unadulterated panic. For 3 weeks, Yan Zhu Ying had kept Lu Chun locked in her personal estate under strict observation. It was the most frustrating, baffling, and deeply disruptive 3 weeks of her life. She had tried everything to make him understand his place as a captive. She had threatened him with lethal poison. He had analyzed the vintage and commended her taste in rare botanicals. She had commanded him to kneel. He had happily complied, then spent 20 minutes adjusting the hem of her robes because the drape wasn't maximizing her majestic silhouette. Every terrifying Yanda instinct she possessed was screaming at her. He is a spy. He is a psychological mastermind playing a high-stakes game to find my weakness. Tonight she was going to end the game. Zhu Ying stood at the edge of the estate's grand courtyard. With a wave of her hand, she did something entirely unprecedented. She deactivated the lethal crimson arrays that surrounded her pavilion. The ancient blood-drinking barriers dissolved into mist. Then she walked to the massive front gate and slid the heavy iron bar out of its cradle, leaving the door completely unlatched. It was swaying gently in the cold mountain breeze. "The path is clear," she whispered into the dark, her voice trembling with a deadly, quiet rage. "Run, Lu Chun. Show your true colors. The moment you step past that threshold, I will hunt you down and paint the mountains with your blood." She vanished into the shadows of the corridor. Her twin daggers, the moon-shattering blades drawn and resting coldly against her forearms. She hid in the darkness, her spiritual sense locked onto the inner chambers, waiting for the inevitable sound of quiet footsteps fleeing into the night. An hour passed, then 2. The front gate creaked on its hinges, completely unguarded. The righteous sex would welcome an all-knowing informant with open arms. He could have fame, safety, and freedom from the demon monster the world hated. By the 3rd hour, a heavy, hollow silence filled the estate. Zhu Ying stepped out of the shadows, her expression hardening into a cold, indifferent mask to hide the sudden, sharp ache in her chest. He ran, just like everyone else. He was just a liar. Her dark aura flared, violent and suffocating, as she marched toward the inner pavilion. She would trace his spiritual signature across the entire continent. She would destroy whatever sect dared to hide him. She threw open the heavy doors to her private bedchambers with enough force to crack the wood, her twin daggers gleaming in the moonlight, ready for blood. She stopped dead in her tracks. There was no packed luggage. There was no missing spiritual loot. Instead, the room was perfectly intact. The library scrolls Lu Chun had spent the afternoon alphabetizing by spiritual affinity were neatly stacked on the shelves. And on her grand silk-draped bed, the Transmigrated was fast asleep. Lu Chun was completely tangled up in her heavy velvet blankets, buried up to his nose, snoring softly. A historical text about her sect's ancient conquests was resting open on his chest. He was entirely defenseless, completely exposed, in the heart of the most dangerous fortress in the realm. The suffocating, impressive pressure in the room vanished in an instant, replaced by her absolute, profound confusion. The floorboards creaked as she approached the bed, her movements no longer predatory, but utterly bewildered. She stared down at him. Why is he still here? She raised one of her daggers, pressing the cold, gleaming tip gently against the center of his chest. "Wake up!" she commanded, her voice dangerously low. Lu Chun stirred, blinking sleepily against the moonlight filtering through the window. He rubbed his eyes, completely unbothered by the lethal weapon resting over his heart, and smiled warmly up at her. "Oh, hey," he mumbled, his voice thick with sleep. He sat up, yawning widely, and stretched his arms. "You're back early. Did the elders' meeting run short?" "The gate," Zhu Ying hissed, her grip on the hilt tightening as she tried to maintain her terrifying demeanor, though her voice faltered. "The barriers are down. The front door is unlocked. You knew." "I know you felt the array dissolve." "Oh yeah," Lu Chun said, shifting over to pat the empty space on the mattress next to him. "The latch on that gate is squeaking again, by the way. I left it open so you wouldn't have to fumble with your keys or waste your spiritual energy breaking through your own security when you got back. Come here, your hands look freezing." She stared at him, her eyes wide. "You could have left. The righteous sex would have protected you. You know exactly what the legends say about me. You know I could break your soul with a snap of my fingers. Why are you still in my bed?" Lu Chun stopped stretching. The playful fanboy energy in his eyes softened into something incredibly earnest, deep, and unshakable. He reached out, and with shocking casualness, he gently tapped the flat of her blade, tilting the dagger away from his chest. "Because I don't want to be anywhere else," he said quietly, looking directly into her cold eyes. "I am a monster, Lu Chun," she pressed, her voice cracking as a lifetime of paranoia and betrayal fought against his gaze. "I paint my throne room in the blood of my enemies. I know exactly how dangerous you are," he replied, a small fond smile touching his lips. "I know the risks, but I also know the legends are wrong. I know you've been carrying the weight of this brutal world entirely on your own. I know how lonely it is at the top of the dark realms. I'm not running from you, Zhu Ying. I'm choosing you, every single day. Who else is going to make sure you actually eat dinner?" The sheer, raw honesty of his words completely shattered her defenses. For a woman who had spent her entire existence surrounded by fear, plotting elders and enemies waiting for her to show a single moment of weakness, his unconditional acceptance was overwhelming. The moon-shattering blade slipped from her fingers, clattering loudly against the floorboards. Zhu Ying dropped to her knees on the edge of the mattress, her terrifying dark aura completely vanishing, leaving her looking raw and vulnerable in the moonlight. Her fingers reached out, trembling slightly as she touched his jawline, checking if he was a hallucination. "You really aren't afraid of me?" she whispered. "Only of losing you," Lu Chun whispered back, tilting his face into her palm. She didn't wait for him to say another word. For the first time, her Yanda possessiveness wasn't fueled by the fear of betrayal. It exploded into pure, desperate devotion. She leaned in and kissed him. It wasn't the fierce, controlling gesture she might have planned in her head to assert dominance. It was deep, breathless, and fierce with a century's worth of hidden relief. She poured everything into it, her loneliness, her fears, and the sudden, terrifying realization that she was completely, hopelessly slipping under his spell. When she finally pulled back, just a fraction of an inch, her eyes were glowing in the dark, a possessive fire burning in them that was softer, but infinitely more dangerous than before. "You're trapped now," she warned, her breath hot against his lips. "You stayed. You gave up your chance. Even if you beg me later, even if the heavens try to tear you away, I will never let you leave this fortress." Lu Chun just laughed softly, wrapping his arms securely around her waist and pulling the supreme tyrant of the dark realms down into the heavy velvet blankets with him. "Good," he smiled, burying his face in her dark hair. "I'd be deeply insulted if you did." The peace of the morning was thoroughly shattered when the sky above the Black Void Mountains split open. A massive fleet of spiritual warships, glowing with the pristine, blinding white light of the Orthodox factions, descended upon the demon sect's borders. Hundreds of elite cultivators from the Righteous Alliance floated down from the heavens, swords drawn, their collective spiritual pressure flattening the forests below. They had come to purge the demon monster and rescue the innocent hostage they believed she was torturing. Down in the estate's main courtyard, Lu Chun was completely oblivious to the world-ending threat. He was wearing a simple linen apron over his robes, happily humming a tune as he pushed a wooden mop across the stone porch. The courtyard was already immaculate, but he wanted it to gleam perfectly before Zhu Ying finished her morning meditation. Boom! The heavy front gates of the estate, the ones he had fixed there, latch on, were blown entirely off their hinges by a burst of holy energy. A handsome young man clad in flawless white silks and a gleaming silver crown stepped through the smoke. It was Master Chun, the renowned self-righteous leader of the Orthodox vanguard. He pointed his legendary spiritual sword dramatically toward the porch, his voice booming with righteous thunder. "Fear not, innocent brother," Master Chun shouted, his eyes locking onto Lu Chun's apron-clad figure. "We have breached the den of the Demoness. Step away from that cursed fortress. The Righteous Alliance is here to liberate you from the cruel clutches of Yan Zhuiying." Lu Chun stopped mopping. He stared at the shattered pieces of the front gate, then looked down at the muddy boot prints Master Chun was leaving all over his freshly cleaned stone floor. His face darkened. The playful, doting fanboy energy completely vanished, replaced by a cold, deeply annoyed glare. These were the exact hypocritical, arrogant heroes whose underhanded tactics and secret crimes he had despised ever since he first learned the law of this world. "Liberate me," Lu Chun's voice carried across the courtyard, entirely devoid of the fear Master Chun expected. He slammed the mop handle violently into the wooden bucket, splashing soapy water across the steps. "You think you're saving me? Are you blind?" Before Master Chun could answer, a dark, suffocating mist materialized at the top of the pavilion steps. Yan Zhuiying emerged from the shadows, her abyssal soul-litter blade already clearing its scabbard, her eyes burning with lethal Yanda fury. She didn't care about the army at her gates. Her entire focus was on pulling Lu Chun behind her, her dark aura flaring to shield him from the hero's spiritual pressure. "Touch him," she whispered, her voice sending a violent shudder through the air, "and I will tear your souls from your bodies and burn them in the abyss for eternity." "Ha! The Demoness shows her true face," Master Chun sneered, raising his sword to signal his elite vanguard to surround them. "You are outnumbered, monster. Your reign of terror ends today. Hey, bootlicker!" Lu Chun's shout cut right through the dramatic standoff. He stepped in front of Zhu Ying, gently pushing her blade down and placing himself squarely between her and the entire Orthodox army. Lu Chun stepped back. Zhu Ying hissed, her heart leaping into her throat. "They will kill you." "Let them try," Lu Chun muttered over his shoulder, giving her a reassuring, fond smile before turning back to face the heroes, his expression twisting into pure disdain. He pointed his soapy finger directly at Master Chun. "You dare talk about righteousness, Chun?" Lu Chun scoffed, his voice echoing loudly across the mountainside. "You, Master Chun, who secretly poisoned your own master 3 years ago with rare shadow root, just so you could inherit the leadership of the Cloud Sect. You think no one knows about the hidden vault beneath your private chambers, where you keep the stolen text of the demon-binding arts?" Master Chun's face went completely pale, his smug expression instantly fracturing into pure terror. "How? How do you know that?" "And you, Elder Zhao," Lu Chun continued, shifting his glaring gaze to the high-ranking elder standing right behind Chun. "You're standing in a defensive vanguard stance, yet your posture is absolute garbage. Your unbeatable sword style has a 3-inch blind spot on the left flank because you broke your ribs 5 years ago hiding a forbidden scroll from your own sect brothers. You dare bring your dirty boots and your pathetic, hypocritical scandals into our home. You dare disrupt my domestic life with my wife. Get off our freshly mopped porch." The entire Orthodox vanguard threw themselves into a collective panic, murmuring and sweating as Lu Chun effortlessly aired out their most heavily guarded, shameful secrets. "Silence him," Master Chun roared, his face flushed with murderous humiliation. "He is speaking demonic heresy. Kill them both. Unleash the grand heaven-purging strike." 100 elite masters channeled their spiritual energy simultaneously. The sky turned a blinding gold as a massive, world-destroying sword of pure light materialized in the clouds, tilting down toward the courtyard with enough force to vaporize the entire mountain province. Zhu Ying's eyes widened. She stepped forward, ready to burn her own life force to unleash her ultimate taboo technique to save him. "Lu Chun, darling, relax," Lu Chun said softly. He didn't draw a sword. He didn't assume a martial stance. He simply walked past her, reached up, and untied his linen apron, tossing it casually onto the porch railing. With a slow, effortless movement, Lu Chun lifted a single hand toward the sky and flicked his wrist. Boom! An explosion of pure, primordial spiritual energy, vast, ancient, and completely boundless, erupted from his body. It didn't just dwarf Zhu Ying's dark power. It completely eclipsed the laws of the world itself. The blinding gold light of the Orthodox army's ultimate strike didn't just shatter. It instantly dissolved into harmless, glittering dust, erased from existence by a mere fraction of his power. The shock wave radiated outward, hitting the entire Orthodox army like a physical wall. 100 elite masters, including Master Chun and Elder Zhao, were instantly brought to their knees, vomiting blood as the overwhelming pressure pinned them to the earth, cracking the stones beneath them. They couldn't even lift their heads. They couldn't breathe. Lu Chun stood at the center of the courtyard, completely unbothered, looking down at the groveling heroes like they were mere insects. Behind him, Yan Zhuiying was frozen. Her daggers slipped an inch from her grip, her mind completely fracturing as the pieces of the puzzle violently slammed into place. The unbreakable cold iron cuffs he shattered on day one. The ancient arrays he casually fixed. The absolute, unshakable confidence he had when she threatened him with death. He was never her captive. Her dungeon couldn't hold him. Her blades couldn't scratch him. He possessed a power that could have leveled her entire sect, conquered the heavens, and rewritten the laws of mortality with a blink of his eyes. And yet, he had stayed in her prison. He had taken her terrifying threats with a smile. He had happily organized her scrolls, cooked her meals, and spent his mornings mopping her floors. He did it all simply because he wanted to be loved by her. An overwhelming, dizzying tidal wave of intense, fiercely protective Yanda adoration exploded in her chest. He was a god among men, an unbeatably powerful entity, and he was entirely, completely, willingly hers. Lu Chun turned back around, the universe-crushing pressure instantly vanishing as he smiled brightly at her, his eyes reverting to those familiar doting fanboy stars. "There," Lu Chun said, brushing a piece of dust off his shoulder. "The garbage has been put in its place. Now where was I? Oh, right." He picked up his mop, looking at her with pure admiration. "Zhuiying, the way your eyes glow when you're ready to fight an entire army. Absolutely peerlessly iconic. You look stunning today." Zhuiying didn't say a word. She sprinted down the steps, threw her arms around his neck, and slammed her lips against his, claiming him with a fierce, possessive desperation that shook him to his core. The absolute suppression of the Orthodox vanguard sent shockwaves through the cultivation world. But inside the demon sect fortress, the daily routine had taken on a beautifully terrifying new dynamic. Now that all the cards were on the table, Yan Zhuiying's Yanda possessiveness didn't diminish, it evolved into a deep, fiercely protective adoration. She no longer worried about Lu Chun running away. Instead, she became intensely proud and fiercely possessive of her doting husband. Of course, she still threatened to lock him away forever. But now Lu Chun would just enthusiastically help her design the layout of the luxury isolation pavilion. With the righteous alliance thoroughly humiliated and the balance of power broken, the corrupt old systems of the world began to fracture. It was time for a new era. Armed with his absolute god-tier power and his flawless knowledge of the world's hidden lore, Lu Chun didn't take the spotlight. He preferred to act as her ultimate strategist, hype man, and enforcer. When greedy sect elders tried to ambush her with ancient forgotten hexes, Lu Chun would casually step out from the shadows, explain the historical counterspell to her like a proud scholar, and watch her flawlessly execute them. Within a year, the entire continent was brought to its knees. The hypocritical Orthodox sects were dismantled, the rogue factions were unified, and Yan Zhuiying became the undisputed supreme ruler of the entire realm. The day of her coronation was an event that would be written into the history books for 10,000 years. The grand palace of the central capital was packed with thousands of cultivators, sect leaders, and former kings. The atmosphere was heavy with awe and absolute submission. Everyone was on their knees, foreheads pressed firmly against the polished obsidian floor, trembling in the presence of the ultimate powerhouse. At the end of the grand hall sat the throne of dark jade. Yan Zhuiying sat upon it, looking peerlessly elegant and profoundly imposing. She wore magnificent flowing robes of deep crimson and midnight black, embroidered with gold thread that shimmered like cosmic dust. A crown of dark, polished crystal rested atop her head, and her eyes burned with the cold, absolute authority of a supreme empress. Her dark aura pulsed gently through the hall, a reminder that she held the life and death of the world in her hands. Standing right beside the throne, completely out of place yet entirely at home, was Lu Chun. He wasn't wearing royal armor or emperor's silks. He wore clean, elegant robes, his hands tucked neatly into his sleeves. A clipboard held under his arm, and the exact same doting fanboy stars in his eyes from the day they first met in the dungeon. While the entire world trembled in terror below, Lu Chun leaned down, leaning dangerously close to the supreme ruler's ear, and whispered, "Darling, the lighting from the high stained glass windows hitting your crown right now. The perfect symmetry of this entire throne room, the composition of this shot is flawless. You look absolutely peerlessly iconic today. I'm so glad I stayed." Zhuiying's icy, ruthless facade cracked for a fraction of a second. She rolled her eyes with deep, affectionate fondness, a tiny smile touching her lips that none of the groveling masses below dared to look up and see. "You are still a fool, Lu Chun," she murmured back, her voice a low, possessive purr. "Even at the apex of the world, you only care about the aesthetics." "Hey, peak design deserves peak praise," he whispered back with a grin. Zhuiying didn't reply with words. Instead, in front of the entire terrified court, thousands of kneeling masters, and the supreme elders of the realm, she reached out, grabbed Lu Chun by his collar, and pulled the most powerful entity in existence right down onto her lap. The entire hall let out a collective silent gasp, everyone keeping their eyes glued to the floor out of sheer terror. Lu Chun didn't mind at all. He comfortably settled against her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders while she wrapped her arms fiercely around his waist, resting her chin on his shoulder to seal her absolute dominion over the world and over him. He had won the ultimate lottery, and she had found the only soul in the universe brave enough, powerful enough, and crazy enough to love a monster. Thanks so much for sticking around until the end of the video. If you enjoyed this, it would mean the world to me if you could like this video if you found it entertaining. Subscribe for more videos in the future. Comment below and let me know your thoughts. I would love to hear from you. Your support helps the channel grow and is greatly appreciated. See you in the next one. Bye.